Welcome back, everybody. It's Graham and John Pedersen. John, how you doing there today?
Wonderful, wonderful.
John looks like he's in for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, John looks like he's in the Army Reserves today, but he's not.
No,
He's still in Oregon. Anyhow, thank you all for being here. And we have we've had some great guests in our recent podcasts, other than John and I in the last one. But we have a great guest today, Mr. Sean Bagshaw from Ashland, Oregon. Um, we go back a lot of years. I'm sure we could sit here, Sean, and tell stories that nobody cares about that are pretty funny, but we're not going to do that. But it's great to have you. What are you up to? It's been a while.
it has been. Hi, Jack. Hi, John. Good to see you guys.
Hey,
Good to be here with you again. And I am up to, yeah, just my usual life here in Ashland, Oregon. Um, I love my life. I have a great life. I have, good family and friends and get outside and do lots of activities, one of which is photography. And then, still teaching photography here and there when I get the opportunity. And it's all fun stuff. I enjoy all of it.
well, you've always been busy, and you know, um, I don't know, John. It's been because of scheduling and stuff. It's been a few months since John and I ran a workshop together, but
Yeah.
almost inevitably when we run a workshop, either your name comes up or one of the folks in your in your organization. We could talk about that a little bit. Either David or some of the other people that are there. Their names come up, and a lot of people say, "Well, should I do an event? Should I do a workshop with these guys?" And you're one of the people, and your group is one of the people that we highly recommend. To because you go to some great places and some great people. Um, John,
Yes.
take it away.
Well, I just want to comment on a non-photography related thing, Sean, that I loved your statement that said, I love my life. And well, I mean, that's a choice that you make. You always exude this wonderful positive energy, and I think you choose to enjoy your life. And that's awesome. I mean, a good day is a choice,
Yep.
and you make it every day.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm glad that comes through. I certainly do. I'm also, I think, very lucky in a lot of ways to be able to
Yeah.
live the life I do and live where I do and in the time in history that I do and all of that. Um, but sure, I think a lot of life can be partly what you make it. And yeah, there's just so much amazing thing. There's, so many things in the world are amazing, things to see, things to experience, people to meet. And yeah, it's just wonderful to be alive and to have a chance to be out there and um,
I
yeah,
think
interact.
age brings a little bit of that gratitude too. I mean, every day that we wake up, we're thankful to wake up.
Exactly.
We get to be my age.
Oh no, no,
You're
no,
lucky to
no, no,
make it till
no,
noon.
no.
If I knew I was going to live this long, Sean, I'd have taken better care of myself.
Ah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and when you're doing all of this, John, and you're out running around in Greenland and wherever else you go, and where Sean and I go, we even get a photograph once in a while, and
Once in a
that's
while.
not necessarily the most important thing anymore. But we're very fortunate. Let's tell people, Sean, and I think you'll agree, we have been so lucky to see what we've gotten to see that if it all stopped today, I mean, it's more than most people do in 10 lifetimes. So we are so fortunate. And, for those of you listening to this, think about that. Don't worry about the photographs. Enjoy where you get to go, man. And
I
it's a great,
I
great thing.
fully agree with that. And that's, I think, one of the questions that I get often is, like, what's your photography about? Or, why are you taking photographs? And my answer to that has always been, at least in landscape photography, is I go out in the landscape anyway. This is just the thing I do. I'm out hiking, backpacking, riding my bike, surfing, skiing, whatever it is. I'm out there. And
You're
sometimes
wind flying now?
wing foiling is my latest
Wind
one. So far, I
Floyd
haven't
foiling.
figured out
What
how
is
to
that? What is that?
So
It's so the board is like a surfboard, but it's got a hydrofoil under it. So when you get up to a fast enough speed, the board raises up out of the water, and then you're just flying on the hydrofoil. And then the thing that powers it is a wing. It's kind of like a sail, like on a windsurf board, except for it's not attached to the board. You're just holding on to it.
You're out
But
of
it's
your
not the
mind.
kite. It's, there's also
You're out of
kiteboarding,
your mind.
but the kite's out, So it's not the kite. It's not a windsurf. It's kind of a new
Yeah.
thing that's in between.
That's
Sean,
cool.
You're a smart guy.
It's
There's sharks in those waters. There's.
Well, in the ocean a little bit, but if you're going fast enough up on the wing on the foil, I think you're fairly safe. You just can't fall in. But I mostly go in lakes and rivers, so shark safe in those places.
You're still nuts, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's good.
I'm just jealous I can't do it.
Well,
But anyway,
I was going to say, let's talk a little bit. Go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, I haven't figured out yet how to wrap photography into the wing foiling, but all the other stuff is I'm out there, and sometimes when I'm hiking or skiing or whatever I'm doing, I bring my camera with me and I get a photo, and that just is like this extra bonus. I mean, the photography piece is great and I love it, and it really adds to my outdoor experiences, but it always comes from that direction. That's the flow, is like I'm going outside and I'm doing stuff, and then sometimes I take a picture, versus the other way around. I'm not going out to take a picture and I have to go into the landscape because I want to do photography. I get to go in the landscape first, and then if I decide to take a picture, that's icing.
Sean, John and I we've been so privileged on this podcast to have some really great photographers. I mean, just the top of the food chain. And
Absolutely.
every one of them, John, am I right, has that attitude. I don't think there's been an exception.
Experience first and photograph second. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing for people who are really into outdoor photography, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seeps. You spend enough time outside, and that just seeps into you, where that becomes more important than coming home with the trophy.
Yeah. And you guys have probably every once in a while on workshops, you'll get somebody who comes with you. And I've heard it, like, well, I don't like getting up early. I don't like being cold. I don't like being hot. I don't like it when the wind blows. I don't like getting wet. I don't like the rain. I don't like when waves crash on me. Hiking uphill, I hate hiking uphill.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to be an outdoor photographer. And when I hear those things, I'm always like, I'm guessing this isn't going to stick for you.
Now try street photography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike Motes is a perfect example. Mike's a dear friend. I took Mike Mike wanted to learn how to be a photographer, so we started doing a couple workshops together. And he realized real early he didn't want to get up for sunrise, so he became a macro guy, and he's great at it. He's maybe the best I know, but he doesn't need to get up at 3 in the morning. So
yeah. I think
thanks for being here.
Hey, Sean,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, let's jump over and talk a little bit about processing, because that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. And I think you're best known for for a lot of the videos that you have done on YouTube, talking about your style of processing, and more particularly your association with Tony Kuiper and the panels that he has produced for Photoshop, and it's a product that I've used for years and years, and love it, absolutely love it. But let's where are you at these days with processing photographs? What's sort of your philosophy around doing that?
Well, I think I kind of get a sense of what I'm trying to do with any particular photograph, and that's always what guides my developing. And then the tools and the techniques I use kind of just follow from that. So, and there's a thing that Tony always says, Tony Kuiper, and I've really adopted. I mean, I was already thinking this way, but the actual wording of it is now really stuck in my brain, thanks to Tony, is what do I think the photo needs next? And really, that's my whole approach to processing or image developing is I'm looking at the photo. Well, what do I think it needs next? And something will pop out at me, I need to brighten it or darken it or more contrast or less contrast or color adjustments or color balance, or I start thinking about, oh, I want to work on just the sky or just that leaf or whatever it is. It needs to have the horizon leveled. But what do I think the photo needs next? And then I pick that thing and I work on that thing, and whatever tool and application that I think is going to best accomplish that for me, I'll do that. And then when that thing's dealt with, then I ask the question again, what do I think the photo needs now? Pick a thing and then work on that thing. And I just kind of keep doing that until when I say, well, now what do I think it needs? I hopefully get to a place where I think, yeah, I got nothing now. I think I'm done.
Do you start with a vision first, like sort of have an idea of what you want the finished product to look like? Or do you just sort of follow this organic process of what does it need next?
I think it can be some of both, and it might be one or the other. Sometimes I just kind of see where the photo takes me, but a lot of times I go in with an idea of a lot of it relates to my experience. We're, talking about experience in photography. So whatever my experience was, usually in the moment gives me a sense of, boy, this photo is going to be, needs to be dramatic, or this needs to be moody, or this needs to be bright and cheerful. And so a lot of times I'll go in with just basic kind of adjectives that are guiding, like my goal here is to, communicate dark moodiness or storminess or a sense of height or something, color, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That also guides me. I'll have that kind of as an endpoint that I'm trying to go for.
Which is great. I think, I spent a lot of time talking to people. YouTube's great for a lot of things. There's a lot of content out there where you can learn how to do something. But I think the key in what makes us great artists is knowing what to do, not how to do it. How to do it's easy. I mean, there's tons of tools and tons of videos, but what you want to do and defining that for yourself and for your image, to me, is sort of that kind of special sauce that makes us all unique.
I agree. And I mean, knowing what you want to do is a challenge for some people for sure. And I know that's one thing that a lot of people are always looking for. How do I know what I want to do?
Right.
Unfortunately, for myself as an instructor, that's one of the things I also, even though I feel like I know what I want to do, communicating how I know that is really difficult for me, where a lot of my colleagues are really good at it. When you think about, or when I think about like an Alex Noriega or a Guy Tal, Sarah Marino, lots of those kinds of folks, Adam Gibbs. These are colleagues I know that are brilliant at explaining what their creative inspirations and thoughts and visions are in words. Mine, I'm like, I don't know. I just know it when it feels right, but I don't know what that is. And so people are like, that's not helpful to me at all, Sean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is sort of intuitive. It comes from the gut of what feels good. And it's really hard to quantify or articulate those feelings for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'll take it one step further. I actually start that process in the field when I'm, before the shutter goes down. I mean, I vision, I hate to use that word, the pre-visualization process, but part of that is where are you going to take it in the processing thing? Because, I don't know, I mean, I don't enjoy the processing. I mean, I like it. I don't enjoy it as much as I think you might or some other people might. So I like to try to get it as much right in the camera as possible. And it has to do with, your feeling at the time. So I guarantee you people listening to this, they're saying, so what, people always say, what camera do you use? What lens do you use? What programs are you currently using in your, no pun intended, in your process?
My digital toolkit, my software applications that I use have really stayed pretty much the same over the years, which is Lightroom and Photoshop. Those are the two main ones. there's a lot of, when I started, all there really was Photoshop. There wasn't even Lightroom. Same with you guys, I'm sure. So Photoshop, pretty much everyone who was doing digital photography, image developing was using Photoshop. Then Lightroom came, and now we've got lots of other options and choices out there. And I know a lot of those are great. I've just stuck in the Adobe environment because that's what I know. It works for me, does everything I need it to do. Every once in a while, there'll be something outside of that would be useful to me. And so I'll go to a third-party app, like Topaz will come up with some stuff that Photoshop doesn't do yet, or some of the other ones. But for the most part, eventually, Adobe figures out and incorporates that stuff into their application. So the more I can keep everything within the Lightroom and Photoshop kind of space, just the easier my life is. The less I have to go out to other pieces of software. It's just easier. So as soon as I can figure out how to do something in Photoshop that maybe I was using a different piece of software for, if I can bring that into Photoshop and just do it there, I'll do that. And then Photoshop's, as far as I know, the only photo editing application that allows third-party developers to develop plugins. So you can really make and customize Photoshop. So that, for example, Tony Kuiper's TK plugin is an example of that. I'm not aware of any other editing application where you can customize it to be what you want it to be with these kind of plugins or apps.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Can you, since you brought up the TK panels, can you give folks a refresher of what those are?
Yeah, well, so Photoshop, like I was just saying, they allow third-party developers to create little mini pieces of software that fit inside of Photoshop. It's kind of like your cell phone. When you get it, your smartphone can do a certain number of things, but then you can go to the app store and get more apps on it. And the more apps you put on your phone, the more stuff your phone can do. So Photoshop's kind of like that. The TK plugin is made by our friend Tony Kuiper, and it's a plugin that allows you to do a lot of things in Photoshop that would either really not be possible or would be very difficult or time consuming or tedious or whatever to do in Photoshop without it. It also lets people who are newer to Photoshop that may not know how in Photoshop to do some of these things. It provides people kind of access to some more advanced operations without having to learn all the back doors and secret handshakes that are in Photoshop. Yeah, so that's just, the TK plugin is one of, I'm sure, thousands of plugins that you could get for Photoshop, but it's the one I use, and I've been using it since 2006 when Tony made his very first one. And it just keeps getting more and more featured as time goes on. Tony keeps developing it and putting more capabilities into it.
Yeah, so folks, these are little flyout panels, if you will, in your Photoshop workspace that have basically buttons to run functions and macros and do some complex calculations, if you will, within Photoshop to make your photo editing a lot easier. I think as you were talking, Sean, the funny thing, I remember when luminosity masks first became more prevalent in digital photo editing, and the manual way to create luminosity masks in Photoshop was an absolute pain in the butt. At least for me, it was at the time. It was so difficult for me to try to keep that in my head. And then when the TK panels came out, and it's one click basically, and you have a mid-tone luminosity mask. It's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
It makes my life so much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the luminosity masks were the start of that, of Tony's very first panels were just around making luminosity masks and speeding up that process for us, for people that wanted to use those tools, but didn't like having, all of the rigmarole you had to go through to create them by hand. And then over time, Tony's just incorporated more and more of those kind of like shortcuts for us that enable us to speed up the process of things that you would do in Photoshop anyway by hand if you knew how to. But you may not want to because they're tedious and time consuming, or yeah, just not worth your time. They kind of, sometimes things in Photoshop that are complex can kind of ruin your creative flow because if I'm going to have to spend 10 minutes figuring out how to do this thing, I forgot even what I was doing. What was my inspiration on the photo? So the plugins can really help you stay in that creative flow space where it's just all happening much faster and in real time. And yeah, so they're really useful for that. One of the I guess the challenge of Photoshop is it's such an old piece of software. You know, the earliest versions of Photoshop were way back in the late 80s, early 90s, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
And so back then, software was all menu driven, and Photoshop is largely menu driven, you know, menus and keyboard shortcuts. So you've got all these menus and sub menus, and you have to go in and hunt for things in these lists to find them. And even if you know all the things in Photoshop, remembering where in what list a thing is can be really challenging. When Lightroom came out, one of the things, you know, 20 years later when they came out with Lightroom is let's make it a much more graphic visual interface where things are all right out there. You know, you don't have to hunt in menus to find them. So that's why a lot of people like Lightroom these days. The TK plugin kind of tries to make Photoshop more visual and less menu driven.
When you process an image, you know, you keep mentioning Photoshop and Lightroom. Again, I'm trying to anticipate questions that our listeners may have. Um, why do you use both? And which do you find, do you personally, everybody's got their own way of doing things, but which do you find, uh, you know, the majority of your processing applications done with?
I would say that these days I use them almost interchangeably. And that's because you can, from Lightroom or Camera Raw, if there are people that don't use Lightroom, they just use Photoshop, and then Camera Raw is how they open raw files. But Camera Raw and Lightroom, the develop module in Lightroom, are essentially the same thing these days.
Correct.
They look a little different, but they do all the same stuff. But if you open a raw image file, so one of your camera's raw image files, into Photoshop as a smart object, that smart object remains linked back to the original raw data. And at any time, you can open up that raw smart object in Photoshop, and you've got all the Lightroom or Camera Raw adjustments right there, and they're adjusting the original raw data. So in that way, if you're working on raw smart objects in Photoshop, you have Photoshop and Lightroom all together, all in one place. And so I'm using them both interchangeably. You know, okay, this is a thing that Photoshop's good for, so I'm going to use the Photoshop tool for that. Oh, this, let's say, some of the color mixing tools in Lightroom are really good for certain color adjustments. Well, I'll just open up the raw smart object and go make those color adjustments with the Lightroom controls. So I can just switch back and forth interchangeably. So in that way, I'm using them both at the same time. But a lot of people these days are using just Lightroom entirely because Lightroom now has enough, I think, features and functions that most of what landscape photographers want to do with their photos today can now be done, and for actually several years now, can be done just with Lightroom. So there are plenty of people that are just using Lightroom only.
Would you recommend, you know, I think for me, like the last 2 years probably with Lightroom, it's finally gotten to the point where it's a good solid editing tool. And my arguments for people to learn Photoshop are diminishing because of that. What do you say to people when they ask you, you know, I'm scared of Photoshop, should I learn it? What's your answer to that?
I think my answer is if you're using Lightroom and it's doing everything you want it to do, and you're very happy with how you're developing your images, then there's probably no need to go to Photoshop. I think where you start running into the realization that Photoshop would be useful, and I agree, it is diminishing, but there are those diminishing cases where the longer you do photography and the more you develop your skills when in processing images, you'll start running into situations where either Lightroom can't do it or Lightroom can do it, but you're not quite satisfied with the results. And so when you start having those situations come up fairly frequently, then I would say it's time to start adding Photoshop into it. Because there are a few things, like a lot of the selections and masking things that you can now do in Lightroom are great. And 90% of the time I find they do a wonderful job, but I still run into situations in Lightroom where I'll have quality issues. There'll be, I can't quite get the selection around something, a skyline or a tree or something quite natural enough. There was a halo or something there. Or I'm not able to get kind of the complete control over the color or the how I'm trying to maybe localize an adjustment or paint in an adjustment just in a certain area is a little bit clunky in Lightroom. And especially the thing that Lightroom doesn't do is combine multiple files together very well. So if you're trying to do focal length blending or focus, depth of field focus blending or exposure blending or, compositing more than one frame together, all of those things you need Photoshop for, really.
100% correct.
Yeah.
And I find that there's certain aspects in Photoshop that are much more precise, what you said, but little things like if you're going to do, some spot removal or even maybe it's just me. They say it's the same thing, but I find that the levels adjustments in Photoshop are much more precise than they are in Lightroom. And it's just certain things. And
I think
you
it's gotten better. I
figure out.
think kind of the analogy I used to, in Lightroom before the masking feature came out, it was just really it was kind of a blunt instrument when it came to editing. And then the masks came out and it got more refined. But for me, Photoshop has always been like a jeweler's screwdriver where you just want to make just
Correct.
finite adjustments to it. And that kind of echoes your point, Sean. It's I think a lot of people, when you progress along your career in photography and you want that little extra bit, that's when you need to make that step into Photoshop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it when you get there. Because if you feel like, yeah, I can do everything I want to do in Lightroom, I never have a complaint, then you're probably using the right tool for the job. But when you start feeling those things like, oh, this isn't quite how I can see this little thing here, that it's fine, but if I could make it better, I would. Now you're probably thinking, okay, there's something in Photoshop that would allow you to make it that little bit better.
You also don't know what you don't know.
That's true. That's true.
And if you never, and never use the precision that Photoshop has in these certain things, I think it would behoove people to at least experiment with that if you're at a certain level. And again, I don't think, if you just bought a camera yesterday, Photoshop is going to be totally intimidating.
Yeah.
But
I agree with that. And now, I mean, because of the subscription model too, which we've had for several years, I mean, if you've got the photographer bundle for whatever it is, 10 or $15 a month, you've got Lightroom and Photoshop. And if you're using Lightroom, and this is what I always encourage people to do is if you're Photoshop curious, is to just slowly add in a few little Photoshop things. Like if there's something you think might be interesting to you in Photoshop or might give you a little extra advantage in something you're trying to accomplish, then find out how to do that one thing. And then for a while, just do that one thing in Photoshop. Do everything else in Lightroom, then go over to Photoshop, do that one thing, and then add a second thing and a third thing. And then slowly over time, you can be working more and more in Photoshop. I think where people really get overwhelmed in Photoshop is where they figure, all right, Lightroom's dead to me. I'm going to Photoshop. And then they're trying to recreate their entire
image developing experience in
Well,
Photoshop.
I'm going to tell you a story, and John, you don't even know this yet, but this will be a surprise to you because last time John and I were sitting in the same room, I mean, I was pretty much a Lightroom guy with 4 or 5 things that I like to do in Photoshop, but because I had some time this summer, I took I did this. I took 5 photographs, 5 raw files, and I had not edited, and I edited them in Lightroom, in Lightroom's Camera Raw, and then I took them into Photoshop and Photoshop's Camera Raw. And I have to tell you, the I know it's supposed to be the same. I know Adobe will tell you it's identical. It's not. The Camera Raw for me in Photoshop is it's easy to use. It's as easy as Lightroom, but I think for me, the images are visibly better.
Huh.
Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Do you put that down to they're better because Camera Raw just your workflow is more natural there, or do you think it's actually
Well, it's more
somehow?
natural in Lightroom because that's all I've been using.
Oh, but you
Well,
like how the
I said
images
I'm going
come
to
out
give
of Camera Raw?
Photoshop a chance, and I was actually blown away by
Hmm.
it's not hard to use. It's it's easy. If I could do it, anybody could do it. But John, I don't know. Am I crazy here? It's just what I
Well,
found.
maybe, but it also could be,
Thank you, John.
Lightroom has struggled off and on with Fujifilm files,
Yes,
and it could be something related to that where you're getting
could
different
be,
performance between
could be,
Lightroom and ACR. So
could be.
yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
yeah.
So I don't
In fact,
know.
a lot of Fuji folks, Sean, are using the DxO Camera Raw program. It's supposed to be, I think it's DxO. John, am I right?
Yeah,
It's supposed to be better than Adobe. I don't know, but this is
yeah,
DxO has
how
figured
they
out
say.
the Fuji RAW file format
Yeah.
better.
I
Well, it's
think
the
so.
X-Trans sensor. Their sensor. It's not it's a different kind of sensor than it's in a Canon, Sony, or Nikon, or you know, I don't know, whatever. So you're now on TK9, am I correct?
TK9 version 3 just came out.
Wow.
So it's still within, yeah, Tony didn't decide to go to a whole new version, TK10 yet. The TK panel, like Photoshop and like so many other things, is really becoming a mature application. What new technology he can add to it at this point is, getting less and less. So he hasn't decided that he's got enough new stuff to make a whole new version 10 yet, but we're on version 3 of TK9, and still it's amazing what he figures out to add and upgrade. Each time he does that, every time he's done it, I think, okay, there's no way, there's nothing else you can
Yeah.
do to improve this. But he's constantly getting feedback from users, from photographers around the world who are, really have a lot of experience and say, hey, what about this idea? Or it would be great if it could do this thing. And Tony's amazing at being able to figure out how to do some of those things. And so the big upgrade in this version that just came out last month in September is, for years, people who are Photoshop users, one of the other things that Photoshop is known for since the beginning is you can record your own Photoshop actions. So if you have these complex procedures that you do in Photoshop all the time, but every time you do it, it's kind of the same set of steps that take a long time, you could record all those steps into your own action, and then you can just run that action, and it just makes things faster and easier for you by just doing those steps so you don't have to do them every time by hand. Well, one of the challenges was that people who like to make actions wanted to be able to put TK panel button clicks in their actions. So like TK panel will make a luminosity mask for me. So I want that luminosity mask to be part of my action, but I can't record the button click. When you do a TK button click, it doesn't go into your action. Now, this is an Adobe thing, not a Tony Kuiper thing. Adobe recently allowed third-party developers to create
to record their button clicks into Photoshop Actions. So now everything you do in the TK panel can be recorded into your own Photoshop Actions, which is it's a huge update, and a lot of people have been asking for it for years.
I'm quite happy about it. I've been wanting that forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if you have TK, we have somebody listening has TK5,
Mm-hmm.
and now they want to upgrade to TK9. How does that work? Is it just overwrite what's there and add the new stuff, or do you have to?
If you're going all the way back to TK5, it's a whole different thing. And in fact, for that far back, you're probably still on also an old version of Photoshop.
Yeah.
Because Adobe changes things, and then so the or the plugin developers have to change things to keep up with what Adobe's doing. So like TK5 wouldn't even install in the current version of Photoshop anymore, because Adobe's changed stuff so much. But
So
let's say you're just coming from TK8 or TK9 version 2 even. Yeah, I think it depends, but basically it'll either overwrite the old version, update you to the new version, or some of them will run side by side. And I can't remember which ones, but like you may, I don't know with TK8. There are some where you could have like TK7 and TK9 both installed simultaneously and switch back and forth. But now it's all through the Adobe Creative Cloud app, your app or your desktop app that you use to manage all your Creative Cloud stuff from Adobe. You just go into there, and if you have plugins you want to uninstall, you just say uninstall them. And when you install, you do it the same way. You just say install.
So uninstall and then reinstall the new one.
Yeah.
The new one.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah, it's been seamless. I've done it for years. It's just a seamless effort to get stuff upgraded.
Yep. Yeah, it's all, it's been a long process getting that all figured out, but it is, I agree, finally now. Boy, back in the early days, you had to go into the root directory and find the right folder and then copy the stuff into the folder. And it was kind of a pain.
Yeah. Hey, John, can we just pivot into printing for a minute?
I think we should.
So, Sean, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see a big Canon printer over Sean's right shoulder. There are two people I know, Michael Gordon's one and Sean is the other, who are really expert printers. And that's we could do a whole hour or two on this, but in the essence of time, John, let's just talk a little bit about printing with Sean and get his thoughts on why and how and whatever.
Is that to me, Jack? Well, I think for me, I wanted to go back to Sean. You and Zach were running or had run that printing course a while ago, and we had talked a little bit about maybe you offering that again. Is anything like that on the horizon?
Yeah. So Zach Schnepp and I, for a few years, I think until COVID, we're running a Producing Better Prints course. It was a live course, and we did that with at the HD Aluminum facility up outside of Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah.
They're a great company. They only do aluminum prints, but they do a great job, really high quality aluminum prints. And
we've had them on, by the way. They've been on.
You have? You had Randy on? That's awesome. Yeah, great folks. And they have a teaching space in their facility there. And so we would teach this course once or twice a year up at their facility. And I haven't done that because my workshop schedule is so much reduced now. I haven't done one of those in the recent years, but Zach has been doing them with Adrian Klein. So they've got those about once a year. I think they do that again. So those are the live classes, which are great, to be able to do that in person. But Zach and I made that whole live course into a video course called Producing Better Prints, which you can get. So the whole thing you can do from home.
How do we find that?
Oh, all my courses are on my website. So yeah, Sean, if you do Google search for Sean Bagshaw,
or it's
And
outdoor.
we'll go one step further. We'll link it here on the
Oh,
podcast.
perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So all my courses are there, the print courses there, all the other stuff that I talk about, any teaching stuff, and all the TK stuff is there as well. But anyway, so that course is there. And yeah, it really covers, we tried to cover, it's not, I wouldn't say, like a really master in printing course. It's in, if you're at that level of printing, then you probably want to go somewhere and find a John Paul Caponigro or a Mac Holbert or somebody like that, an Epson Print Academy person that really knows the world of fine art gallery printing and that kind of stuff. But this course is, yeah, it's just all the fundamentals of printing. How do what do you need to know about color spaces and ICC profiles, and how do you soft proof, and how do you test print, and what's the difference between printing from Lightroom and printing from Photoshop, and all that kind of stuff.
What do you print from? Lightroom or Photoshop?
Well, for back in the beginning, it was Photoshop because that's all there was. And then I moved to Lightroom because at some point in there, Lightroom, Adobe put printing specific tools in there. There's a soft proofing interface in the develop module, which is a really easy way to do soft proofing, which is basically getting a simulation of what the print's going to look like up on your screen. So you can compare the print output to what your original version looks like and see, okay, what I thought, how it looked on the screen was great, but it's not going to print that great yet. So I need to make a few more adjustments to it to get my print to better match my original. That's what soft proofing is. Lightroom has a very easy, user-friendly way of doing that Photoshop doesn't. And Lightroom also has its print module, which makes printing from Lightroom easier. So for years I used that. And then for years I also was telling Tony Kuiper, what would be great is if you made a print plugin for Photoshop for me, because I think I just want this, that would make printing out of Photoshop more like how it is in Lightroom. And at some point, I guess Tony didn't have other projects going, or I don't know what to do. He said, "Yeah, sure, I'll give that a try." And so he started
got
working.
sick of hearing you ask him for it.
Yeah, probably. I probably just wore him down. But and Tony really didn't have a concept of what a print module would look like. So I said, well, it should do this and it should do this. And here's how Lightroom works. Can you kind of recreate that in Photoshop? And eventually we got to a thing that we both agreed, wow, that's actually pretty good. And so I loved it. But Tony said, that's so good. I think other people would appreciate it. We should make this available to the public, which we did in June. But because it was kind of a side project and just a hobby thing, something for fun, we made it available for free. So the TK print module and the videos of how to use it are on my website for free. You can get those free. And it makes printing from Photoshop more like printing from Lightroom.
Terrific.
Have you noticed any resurgence in people's interest in printing over the last couple of years? Because, it died off pretty well. I mean, people stopped printing for a long time. You seen any of that come back?
Definitely, I would say that the Producing Better Prints course was very well received. People really were interested, and I was surprised. I think people already know this stuff, or a lot of people do, but I was amazed at how many people who had been doing photography for many, many years wrote and told me, I've never printed a photo. Or would write and tell me, yeah, I tried printing some photos and they really didn't turn out, and so I quit. But I have seen in the last bunch of years, people, I think now that kind of the shine of social media is worn off, it's fun and it's still there, social media and the internet and images on screens and all that. But I do think there is an interest and a passion that people have of wanting to see their images on a piece of paper in the 3D world.
Well, I think number one, Sean, the print is the final. It's it. I mean, that could tell you whether the photograph's successful. It's not on a screen. The other thing I think is that I think the technology, John, what do you think about what I'm going to say here? Because you're better versed in this than me. The technology in printing, even 5 years ago, it's so much. It has advanced so fast and it's much easier now because of the automation of the the software, like you have done and like Adobe has done and some other people, I guess, that it's not hard to really make a really good print now. Back in the day, the ink was expensive, and if you screwed up, you had to redo it and go back and forth, and it got costly. But
And
now I think
frustrating.
it's gotten a lot easier because the technology has gotten
Yeah.
easier and the learning curve's just
Mhm.
gone up.
Printing, I used to call printing a black art. It was very much a hidden thing that was scary to many, including me. I mean, I didn't know it nearly as well as I wanted to, and nowadays it's much easier. So, well, that's good.
I I agree. I agree. I think all of that sounds is my experience as well. And you can obviously get great home printers that, and they make smaller ones than this and bigger ones than this, that you can print right from home. It's easy to do. I wouldn't say it's inexpensive, but it's, if it's something you're passionate about, it's probably less expensive than other things you could be doing with your time and money. But you don't have to. I mean, I think you're printing, if you can print at home, your printing will improve the most, the quickest, because you can really practice and get instant feedback. But you don't have to own your own printer, because that ink isn't cheap and the paper's not cheap. And if you're only going to print a couple of prints, that's a lot of hardware and plastic and electronics to own for a couple of prints. But Print Labs online ordering of images now is also amazing, and the Print Labs a lot of them do really wonderful work. And yeah, if you just want to get a couple of your photos kind of enlarged so you can hang them on the wall, there's great places where you can do online prints and get, basically the online printers, a lot of them are using the same equipment that you would have in your home printer. And so the same inks and the same papers and all of that stuff.
The folks at HD, I think, are the top of the food chain on aluminum, but
Yes,
not every image looks good on aluminum. And
correct.
Right.
uh, you don't obviously use any labs. Do you have any experience with them that you could
Oh
share?
no, I use labs all the time.
Oh, you do?
This is basically a test printer for me. Doing
Really?
test prints. Because this thing will print like, basically like a 16, let's see, what about, yeah,
11 by
like a 16 by
17.
20, 16 by 24. It's kind of the biggest size. Usually 12 by 18 is the biggest print I make on this.
Hmm.
So anything bigger than 12 by 18, I'm going out to a lab. And anything that's a specialty, I can print on photo papers here just fine. But if I want aluminum or canvas, or I want a face mounted acrylic, that's all with labs too, because that's all more equipment and more technology to do those on your own. And aluminum is great. Aluminum looks amazing if you like that deep glossy look, which I agree, not all images and not everyone wants that look all the time. But if that is the look you want, aluminum's great. It's light, it's durable, it's easy to clean, comes ready to hang. You can
Yeah.
get a float frame, or they can actually frame it for you if you want like a more traditional frame around it. You don't need to
They
have
do a great
glass in
job.
front of
They're
it.
terrific, these guys.
Yeah. So aluminum's wonderful, and HD aluminum, all they do is aluminum. They don't do anything else. So they're really good at it. Their quality and their whole process is excellent. Their customer service and everything. But then, yeah, canvas, face mounted acrylic, other types of specialty print processes that you're probably not going to be able to do in your home. Yeah, I order those out from a lab.
Is there a
This is
one-stop shop that you recommend, or different people do different things?
I would say if you're just kind of getting into it, the one-stop shop that's pretty good is Bay Photo, but they're huge.
Yeah.
Their prices are okay. Their shipping is very affordable because they do so much volume. It
Mhm.
costs almost nothing to get big prints shipped to you, from Bay Photo, and they offer everything. They have every possible combination of types of print that you could want. Um, Sometimes I do have some quality control issues through them, just because, again, I think they're
They're big.
producing such a high volume. They've always been really good. They've always replaced stuff like when it's come
Right.
and it's not been quite right. they no questions asked, just send me another one. Problem for me with that is I do a lot of drop shipping to customers. And so if I'm sending something from the lab direct to a customer, I don't want it to show up to the customer and not be right. So
Right.
I don't do that so much with them. Nevada Art Printers is one that I use a lot for both acrylic and canvas. They do a great job, and I've never had an issue with quality control from them. Um, and then HD aluminum for aluminum, and those are my main ones that I use. I know there are many other great labs out there, and more
Right.
coming online all the time.
Wow. Well, John, I think we could you keep going here. Sean, thank you so much for being here. It's been too long. Your schedule, you know, I mean, I know you're not doing the workshop thing like you used to. Neither am I, but it's been tough getting our stars aligned here. But thank you for being here and taking some time. Where are you off to next?
I am headed next week to South Korea with our mutual friend David Cobb.
Wow.
Wow. How is David?
David is great. He's doing well. I haven't seen him for a few months, but he's been out. I mean, that guy, talk about somebody who is always out looking for
Yeah, yeah.
new photography to do. He's been traveling the US a lot and also traveling to other countries. He just has the same passion for
Man, good
photography that
for
he's
him.
always had.
Good for him.
And
What are you going to do in South Korea?
so we're just going to be photo tourists there, the two of us. This is actually a trip that he and I had planned. We've been planning for years. I want to say maybe 8 years. He said, South Korea is a place I haven't photographed. I want to go. So, of course, we planned the trip and we were going to go in 2020.
Hmm.
And we all know what happened in
Yeah.
2020. So that trip didn't end up happening. So this has been our first chance to reschedule that trip since the pandemic. And
Don't
yeah, we're
drive
just going
too
to
far
go.
north. When you drive
I think we'll
north, be
stay out of the
careful.
we'll stay out of the DMZ.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. John, let's see. I'm heading up to the UP of Michigan tomorrow morning, and I've
Yep.
got nothing ready to go yet. So I'm going up there on a non-workshop, going
I
up there
love
to
that.
shoot. And then a week from Sunday, or Monday, I'll be with John, and we're heading to
Yeah.
the Eastern Sierra. My 23rd workshop in the fall in the Eastern Sierra.
20,
Tell how old
23rd
I am.
workshop or 23 seasons? Is those
23 seasons.
23
23
seasons?
seasons.
Wow.
And we'll be heading over there. And that's sold out, folks, if anybody wants to do that this year. But we are doing it again next year. It's on both my website and John's. I would suggest registering quick because that event sells out really quickly for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yep.
It's a magical place that time of year. And after that, John, what are you up to?
Just the Tetons in December.
Econs in December. Yeah.
Yep.
Tetons in December.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the
nobody's
best time to
there.
go, man. Best time to go.
The animals are active. The crowds are gone. You can eat. You can walk in a restaurant in Jackson.
You
Very nice.
literally have
And
the park to yourself during that time of year.
I bet the mountains look spectacular.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it's supposed to be a snowy, cold, beautiful winter this year. That should be
Yeah.
magical over there. So
It should.
again, we're very lucky and fortunate to do that. Sean, please have fun over there. I'm going to give David a call from the car tomorrow morning. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Yeah.
It was great having you on. Promise me you'll come back here sooner rather than later.
Anytime
And-
you can
and
anytime you can hunt me down.
what we need to do next time, John, we'll get Sean on and maybe take some. We'll do I know this is a audio centric podcast, but maybe we can get into some more specifics, especially on. I'd love to see what you come back with from South Korea.
I hope we find. I think so. It looks beautiful. I think it's going to be a great very photogenic opportunity over there. We're looking forward to it. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully there's some good stuff there. I'd be
Yeah.
glad to come on anytime, guys.
Well, next time you
Beautiful.
go, let me know. I'll be happy to carry your bags. So, well, listen, thank you for being here, folks.
All right.
Again, for those of you who are new to the podcast, please subscribe. You can send an email to our podcast email address, which is wetalkphoto@gmail.com. We're going to put a whole bunch of links up, or John's going to put the links up. I'm not that smart. And we'll link Sean's all his products that are available, and these I don't want to even call them plugins. They're much more than that. Will be available on Sean's website. And Sean, thank you so much. Travel safe, and please come back soon. Okay.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you, and same to you guys.
All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you later.
Hang in when we cut off here, folks. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.